I'll start by saying I love this country. I love the freedoms afforded in this country. I love the basic setup of America despite its flaws. I have an understanding of America. And because of that, it's a little easier for me to absorb some of the not so desirable parts of the country. What I want to talk about today is the assimilation question. And it's a very complicated topic because there's hundreds and hundreds of views on the role of assimilation in society. There's also an incredible amount of evidence as far as the benefits of assimilation versus the benefits of individualism. I think to a degree we're all individuals, and that should be encouraged, but I believe it should be encouraged to a point. I once visited Italy, and the culture is a little bit different than ours. We went to the Sistine Chapel. We went to the Vatican, and there were certain stipulations that were requested by the officials in the Vatican. And one of these stipulations was no shorts. Dress your nicest, preferably dress pants, a nice dress for a woman, a button-up for a man. And when I got there, I saw several people that had adhered to what was being asked of them. I was one of those people. But I also saw individuals that completely discarded that very notion. They came in shorts. They dressed completely opposite of what was requested by the Vatican official, and they were not accosted. They were not thrown out, but you could see the look on the faces of some of the guides there, the people that were on hand to assist. You could see the looks on their faces. And, I did not talk to any of them, so I can only speculate. But the ones that showed a blatant disrespect for the rules of the chapel, of the cathedral, the look on their face was kind of like, you stupid people. I'll go a step further. You stupid, disrespectful Americans. The ones that were in question as far as their dress were American. Now, earlier on this trip, we had been treated a certain way. There was a certain degree of American fatigue, especially when people would ask for directions. I'd go and ask for directions. They either thought I was a black guy from Africa trying to sell them some of my wares, and once that they figured that out, they had a new type of issue with me. I'm another American here, another kind of American here, asking for directions. If you go to a country and you develop a reputation for something, then people tend to treat you in a blanket fashion. I think about assimilation in America when groups of people come over to our country. There's some people that say America wasn't built on a country of immigrants. It was damn for sure built on the backs of people from different places. We can't dispute that. But what ties these people together is a certain kind of culture, whether there's variations of that culture or not. That's not what's in question. What's in question are people that come over with no intentions of any assimilation whatsoever. They're bringing their own many countries with them, on their backs, the best aspects of their countries. Now, do I find a problem with this? Culturally speaking, no, I don't find any problem with because I have Nigerian roots. I've learned so much about being Nigerian that I'd like to incorporate some of the things that I've learned about Nigeria in my art. I'd like to visit Nigeria I have no desire to live in Nigeria because I understand their government. I understand their situation. I only have a desire to visit those places in Nigeria of beauty. I'll be honest. Well, when people come here to America, I have a problem with provisions being made for a percentage of the country as opposed to a majority of the country. I don't think there's anything wrong with speaking Spanish. I think it probably would be to my benefit if I learned to speak Spanish. I don't, however, think that I should be cut from consideration of a job because I don't speak Spanish. Until recently, I've gone my entire life not speaking another language except for English. Now, granted, there are other countries that naturally encourage their citizens to speak more than one language, and I think America makes a mistake on that behalf, in that regard, because it does make you more versatile. It does make you more accessible in situations. But I don't think that I should be scoffed at for not speaking a language that is not native to my country. When people come to America, or rather when you come to a country that doesn't have parameters, then a certain degree of admiration and respect is never achieved. We're so busy trying to fight against a definitive term of the American way that we haven't developed an identity. And there are those that would point out and say, well, if we develop one identity, then we're discriminating against another. I don't believe China feels that way. I would be hard pressed to go to China or Japan and behave any way that I want and then demand citizenship. I would have to go to China or one of the homogenous European countries, and I would have to more than likely show a willingness to conform to the culture that's there. And what that does, whether someone admit it or not, it creates a certain order and a certain understanding. Parameters are okay. I mean, it's not a situation that has to be perceived like something that's confining. You're not confining people and trying to keep them from who they are. What you're trying to do is have a set of established rules and an understanding of culture so that there is order. When you embrace everyone, you will forget someone. It's almost like on Christmas, when you try to buy gifts for everybody and you forget that one cousin, and it leads to a very awkward situation. I see America doing that. There are 1% and 2% and 3% of the population that are making cries to the general majority public that are ludicrous. It's impossible to ask an entire country to bend for a tiny percent of the population, bend the entire structure. It's impossible. And when that structure tries, the entire thing could possibly fall. By not having an identity, we haven't identified what America's parameters are. And a lot of immigrants coming over hadn't thought about that. They're more worried about other things. They're not worried about cultural structure. They're not worried about the structural society of America. They're worried about fleeing circumstances that brought them here to begin with. That's logical. Why would they be worried about anything else? There are some countries that would be more than happy to see America turn into a smaller version of the country that they fled, minus the war, minus the famine. They're not interested in learning what America is already. Is that right or wrong? I don't know. It's a perspective. It's one to consider. There has been talk of I guess preferential immigration, and people often try to turn that racial. America's a westernized country, and what does westernized mean? That doesn't mean westernized by Africans. It doesn't mean westernized by people from, I don't know, Australia. It means westernized by a kind of people that are very homogenous. There's differences and slight variations, but there's a complete understanding of their society as a whole. Not the details. I'm talking about the overall concept of what Western culture is. Western culture is white. It's European in nature. So when people from Europe come over, they assimilate much easier than anybody else because they're already familiar with the way that that Western culture works, Western society works. And this can be seen in areas of our country where the living conditions of immigrants are completely different. Norwegians come over here and they don't form large ghettos. People treat ghetto like it's a bad word. Ghetto is just a concentration of a specific kind of people. So, you could look at some of the affluent places as ghettos, but in this context, we're using ghetto in the less than positive way that we've come to know it. They don't form neighborhoods that are exclusive in the same way. And they tend to prosper. They tend to prosper not because they're of a certain race, I believe, but because they're of a certain understanding of the culture. The same can be said of any group. I'll even go personal. When you hear the term the sellout black guy, it usually denotes an African American of who is employed, who is upper middle class, who speaks correct English, who is basically the American, the old idea of the American dream, the wife and the picket fence. Is nonviolent, and many times this guy is called the Uncle Tom, the sellout, which is funny because Uncle Tom actually didn't sell anybody out. If anybody would pick up a goddamn book and read Harriet Beecher Stowe's novel, they would know that Uncle Tom never sold anybody out. He lost his life selling his own person out so that several women could flee the slave conditions, the bondage. But they don't know that because as Americans, we believe in rumors. We don't like picking up books very often. Yes, I'm generalizing and I could be wrong. But right now, I don't give a shit about that. I'm not caring about being correct about anything except the topic on hand. I care about giving this information and getting feedback. If my perception of things is wrong, that's fine. But all I can do is comment on what I see. It's okay for America to begin considering defining its culture. Other countries do. I went off on a tangent. I almost got mad, but I'll get back on point. Other countries define who they are in their culture. And they define their expectations with no guilt. Is it possible for America to do that? Is there anything wrong with saying, hey, if you come to our country, this is the expectation? I see people like Linda Sarvo, they have horrible things to say about the country, and the United States enables her to do that. It's one of the only places in the world where groups of people can come over, say horrible shit about the place. Well, now, whether that stuff is true or not, hey, I can understand. Some people have a point. But to come over with the attitude of, yeah, thanks for letting me over, but you suck. I don't think that should be excused by Americans. When you assimilate, there is benefit, whether people want to talk about that benefit or not. And I notice that the majority of people that assimilate into Western culture tend to do better in Western culture. Hell, the same would be true if I decided to become a part of Aboriginal culture in Australia. There's customs and ways of dictating yourself, presenting yourself that are probably acceptable by tribal standards. For me to do anything else, to come into somebody else's house where they demand the culture is you take your shoes off when you come in the house and I just walk across with my boots on, is disrespectful. Our country lets people come in a very disrespectful manner many times. Not all the time. I'm strictly talking about those instances for people that downgrade the country, yet they call it home. I think it's okay to be disappointed in America. I'm disappointed in our the wars that are going on between the political parties right now. I'm not happy with America in that way. But overall, there is a love of country that I feel. I feel a love of this country. I don't think it's asking too much for the people that are coming to America to consider loving the country that they're coming to. You can't have a situation. And, I think about this. There was a guy that I saw one time, a homeless guy. And, you go in the store and, or the McDonald's, you come back with a hamburger. Guy throws the burger away because he's like, I don't like mustard. When you didn't have a hamburger in the first place. America needs to redefine its cultural borders, and I don't mean you have to have one pervading thing over everything. What I'm saying is that there should be some understood components of American culture that are American. Now, within that component, there is room for diverse cultural expression. I think there can be individualism as long as the overarching concept of American culture is understood. The backbone of it is Western. The backbone of it, or rather for the country to continue to exist as it has, will more than likely need a Western backbone. I've compared the quality of life, as I understand it, between Western civilizations and Western culture and non-Western culture. And I have to say, for me personally, I'm sold on Western culture. I'm sold on the technology. I'm sold on the advances in science. I'm sold on the quality of life, as I understand it. We have to be careful not to tear down the face of our country just for the sake of putting up something new with no consideration as to what that new is. If you're going to peel back the layers and do country reconstruction, have a vision for what that country is going to look like, it cannot be a mad dash, lest this country end up looking like other failed countries. Pull back and let's consider setting certain parameters. One of the first things that should be prerequisite for living in this country is that the people coming do so with the intention of wanting to love this country, not just be here. It's time for that cup of coffee. Take care.